The HOA Karen thought she'd won when she called 911 on my wife for carrying a gun illegally. 42 seconds later, 6 police officers stood at attention and saluted Detective Maria Santos' badge. Linda Morrison had just made the biggest mistake of her life, and our entire neighborhood was about to watch her fall. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Linda Morrison had ruled Maple Ridge Estates for 8 years. As HOA president, she controlled every blade of grass, every paint color, and every life in our quiet suburban neighborhood. Her perfectly manicured lawn, spotless white Mercedes, and clipboard full of violations made her the queen of our little kingdom. My wife Detective Maria Santos and I had moved to Maple Ridge 6 months ago, hoping for peace after her transfer to the local precinct. Maria worked narcotics, dangerous, stressful work that required her to carry her service weapon even off duty. She was a 15-year veteran cop, decorated for bravery and one of the toughest people I knew. But Linda Morrison didn't care about any of that. "Excuse me," Linda said, cornering Maria at our mailbox on a sunny Tuesday morning. "I need to discuss your situation." Maria looked up from our mail, still in her jogging clothes after her morning run. "What situation?" Linda's eyes fixed on the slight bulge under Maria's running jacket, her concealed service weapon. "The gun situation. We don't allow weapons in this neighborhood." "I'm sorry, what?" Maria asked, genuinely confused. "Weapons are prohibited by our HOA covenant. You'll need to remove it from the premises immediately." I watched from our kitchen window as my wife's expression changed from confusion to disbelief. Maria had faced down drug dealers, gang members, and armed criminals, but she looked genuinely shocked by Linda's demand. "Ma'am, I'm a police officer. I'm required to carry my weapon. I don't care what you claim to be. Rules are rules." Linda thrust a piece of paper at Maria. "This is your official violation notice. You have 24 hours to comply or face a $500 fine." Maria took the paper, read it, and looked back at Linda with the calm expression she used on suspects who were about to make very bad decisions. "Linda, I suggest you research this issue before you proceed. Don't tell me how to do my job, young lady. I've been protecting this neighborhood longer than you've lived here." That was Linda's first mistake. Her second was what she did next. The next morning, Maria was working in our front yard, planting flowers we'd bought at the local nursery. She wore a loose t-shirt and gardening gloves, but her service weapon was properly concealed beneath her shirt as required by department policy. Linda emerged from her house like a hawk spotting prey. She marched across the street with her phone already in hand. "I warned you," she announced loudly enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. "You have chosen to ignore our community standards." "Linda, please don't do this," Maria said, standing up and brushing dirt from her knees. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake was letting people like you into our neighborhood." Linda dialed 911. "Yes, I need police immediately," she said, speaking clearly so everyone could hear. "There's a suspicious woman with a gun in my neighborhood. She's armed and dangerous. I think she might be planning something terrible." Maria's face went white. Not from fear but from anger. Linda had just called 911 with a false report, claiming a police officer was a threat. This wasn't just HOA overreach anymore, it was a crime. "Linda, hang up that phone right now," Maria said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Don't you dare threaten me. I'm a pillar of this community." Linda continued her dramatic performance for the 911 operator. "She's very aggressive. I think she's on drugs. She keeps reaching for her weapon. Please hurry." Neighbors were coming out of their houses now, drawn by Linda's raised voice. Mrs. Patterson from next door looked concerned. The young couple across the street stood on their porch, watching nervously. Maria pulled out her phone and made her own call. "Sergeant Martinez? This is Detective Santos. I have a situation at my residence. Someone just called 911 claiming I'm an armed threat. Yes, I'm off duty at my own home. Badge number 2847. I need backup units to know who they're responding to." Linda's confident expression faltered slightly, but she was too committed to her performance to stop. "Now she's calling her accomplices," Linda told the operator. "She's coordinating with other criminals." That's when we heard the sirens. 3 patrol cars arrived within minutes, lights flashing but sirens off as they entered our quiet neighborhood. 6 officers emerged, hands resting cautiously on their weapons as they assessed the situation. Linda rushed toward them, waving her arms dramatically. "Thank goodness you're here. That woman has been terrorizing our neighborhood with her gun. She threatened to shoot me." The lead officer, Sergeant Williams, looked at Linda with the patient expression cops use when dealing with difficult civilians. Then his eyes found Maria, standing calmly in our front yard with her hands visible. "Ma'am, we received a report about an armed individual. Can you identify yourself?" Maria reached slowly into her back pocket and pulled out her badge wallet. "Detective Maria Santos, badge number 2847. I'm off duty at my residence." Sergeant Williams examined the badge, then his entire demeanor changed. He straightened slightly and spoke with new respect. "Detective Santos, what's the situation here? This woman filed a false police report claiming I was an armed threat. I'm off duty, properly licensed, and carrying my service weapon as required by department policy." Linda's face was turning red. She's lying. She's not a real police officer. Anyone can buy a fake badge. Sergeant Williams turned to Linda with a look that could freeze fire. "Ma'am, Detective Santos is well known in our department. She's one of our most decorated narcotics officers. But she has a gun." "Yes, ma'am. Police officers carry guns. That's their job." The other officers were trying not to smile. One of them, Officer Johnson, stepped forward. "Detective Santos, sorry about this. We had to respond to the call. I understand completely. You did your job exactly right." Then Sergeant Williams did something that made my heart swell with pride. He turned to face Maria, straightened to attention, and gave her a crisp salute. "Detective Santos, it's an honor to serve with you." The other 5 officers immediately followed suit, all saluting my wife in perfect unison. Linda's mouth dropped open. The neighbors who had gathered to watch the drama looked stunned. Mrs. Patterson started clapping. But Maria wasn't done. "Sergeant Williams, I need to file a formal complaint. This woman knowingly filed a false police report, claiming I was an armed threat when she knew I was a police officer." "Absolutely, Detective. That's a serious crime." Linda's face went from red to pale in seconds. "Wait, what? I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." "Ma'am," Sergeant Williams said, "filing a false police report is a felony. Making false statements about a police officer is an additional charge. You're looking at serious jail time." What Linda didn't know was that Maria had been recording everything on her phone since the first confrontation. Every threat, every violation notice, every false claim was documented. Detective Maria Santos didn't just fight crime, she built airtight cases. Within an hour of the police response, Maria had filed formal charges against Linda Morrison for filing a false police report, and making false statements to emergency services, harassment of a police officer, intentional infliction of emotional distress. But Maria was just getting started. She began investigating Linda's HOA activities with the same thoroughness she used on drug dealers. She pulled public records, reviewed HOA documents, and interviewed neighbors who had been bullied by Linda's tactics. What she found was a pattern of abuse that went back years. Mr. Chin had been fined $2,000 for having his trash cans visible from the street, even though they were behind a fence. The Jackson family had been threatened with foreclosure because their mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Mrs. Rodriguez had been harassed for months because Linda didn't like her garden gnomes. Young couple next door, the Hartmans, had been fined repeatedly for their child's sidewalk chalk art. Linda Morrison had been running a reign of terror, and nobody had the power to stop her. Until now. Maria's arrest report became public record. When the local news discovered that an HOA president had been arrested for calling 911 on a decorated police officer, they smelled a story. Reporter Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News arrived at our house the next day. "Detective Santos, can you tell us what happened?" Maria was professional and calm, explaining the facts without emotion. She described Linda's harassment, the false violation notices, and the 911 call that led to criminal charges. "This wasn't about HOA rules," Maria said. "This was about a person who used her position to bully and intimidate her neighbors. When that didn't work on me, she escalated to filing false police reports." The story aired that evening with the headline, "HOA President Arrested for Calling Police on Decorated Officer." But the real explosion came when the story hit social media. The video of 6 police officers saluting Maria in our front yard went viral within hours. #HOA Karen and #Salute to Badge started trending. Comments poured in from thousands of people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Linda Morrison became the face of HOA abuse across the country. News crews from 3 different stations camped out on our street. National news picked up the story. Late-night talk shows made jokes about the woman who called the cops on the cops. Linda tried to hide in her house, but reporters found her everywhere. They interviewed her neighbors, her co-workers, and former HOA board members who had resigned in frustration with her methods. The picture that emerged was of a petty tyrant who had made life miserable for dozens of families. The media attention gave our neighbors something they'd never had before: a voice. Mrs. Patterson, who had been quiet and intimidated for years, spoke to Channel 7 about Linda's harassment. "She fined me $300 because my roses were too tall. Too tall. They were beautiful flowers that brought joy to everyone who saw them. But Linda said they violated the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood." Mr. Chin showed reporters his collection of violation notices, 43 of them over 2 years. "She measured my grass with a ruler. A ruler. If it was over 2.5 inches, I got a fine. I felt like a prisoner in my own home." The Hartmans talked about their 4-year-old daughter crying because the mean lady said she couldn't draw on the sidewalk. "We almost moved because of Linda Morrison," Mrs. Hartman said. "Our daughter was afraid to play outside. No child should feel that way in their own neighborhood." Story after story poured out. Years of suppressed frustration and anger finally had an outlet. Linda's support system crumbled. The other HOA board members resigned rather than face association with her. The neighborhood management company terminated their contract with Maple Ridge Estates. Linda Morrison found herself completely isolated, facing criminal charges and a community that had finally found its voice. Linda hired an expensive lawyer who tried to dismiss the charges as a misunderstanding between neighbors. But Maria's case was bulletproof. She had recordings of Linda's threats. She had the false violation notices. She had the 911 call transcript where Linda deliberately lied about Maria being a threat. Most damaging was Linda's own HOA meeting minutes, where she had written, "We'll use any means necessary to remove the Santos family from our neighborhood." The prosecutor, District Attorney Rebecca Stone, took the case personally. "This isn't just about filing a false report," DA Stone told reporters. "This is about the abuse of authority and the harassment of a decorated police officer who has risked her life to protect our community." Linda's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. Maria refused. "She needs to face the full consequences of her actions," Maria told me. "If I let her off easy, she'll just find new ways to hurt people." The trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but Linda's problems were just beginning. With Linda facing criminal charges, the neighborhood held an emergency election for new HOA leadership. Maria decided to run for president. "I've spent 15 years protecting and serving," she told the packed community center meeting. "Now I want to protect and serve this neighborhood." Her opponent was Bill Webster, Linda's former ally who promised to restore order and property values. The campaign was fascinating. Bill represented the old guard, strict rules, heavy fines, and authoritarian control. Maria represented transparency, fairness, and community cooperation. Linda tried to influence the election from her exile, sending anonymous flyers claiming Maria was dangerous and anti-community. But the neighborhood had changed. People were no longer afraid. Election day saw the highest turnout in HOA history. Maria won by a landslide, 127 votes to 23. Her first act as president was to review and reform every rule Linda had implemented. Grass height restrictions were eliminated. Mailbox color requirements were dropped. Garden gnome bans were lifted. Children's sidewalk art was officially protected. The $50,000 in fines that Linda had accumulated from various families was forgiven and refunded. Property values actually increased as word spread about the neighborhood's transformation from an HOA nightmare to a model community. Linda's trial was a media circus. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, reporters, and curious observers who had followed the story. Prosecutor Rebecca Stone methodically presented the evidence. The recordings, the violation notices, the 911 transcript, and the pattern of harassment. Linda's defense attorney tried to portray her as a dedicated community volunteer who made an honest mistake. But then Maria took the stand. She testified with the same calm professionalism she brought to drug busts and gang investigations. She explained how Linda's harassment had escalated over months, culminating in the false police report that could have had deadly consequences. When someone calls 911 claiming there's an armed threat, officers respond ready for violence, Maria explained. If I had made any sudden movement, if I had been holding anything that looked like a weapon, this situation could have ended in tragedy. The defense attorney tried to attack Maria's credibility, suggesting she had overreacted to normal HOA procedures. That's when District Attorney Stone played the ace she'd been holding. "Detective Santos, how many commendations have you received during your 15 years of service?" "17, ma'am." Including commendations for bravery under fire? Yes, ma'am. 3 citations for valor. Have you ever been disciplined or reprimanded for excessive force or inappropriate conduct? No, ma'am. Never. DA Stone turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a decorated police officer who has risked her life to protect our community. The defendant tried to destroy her reputation and potentially endanger her life with false accusations. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Linda Morrison was sentenced to 6 months in jail, 2 years probation, and 200 hours of community service. But the real punishment was the complete destruction of her reputation and authority. She lost her position as HOA president. Her friends abandoned her. Her neighbors avoided her. The local country club revoked her membership. Linda had built her identity around being the queen of Maple Ridge Estates. Now she was just another person who had made very bad decisions. She tried to appeal the conviction, but her lawyer advised her that the evidence was overwhelming and an appeal would likely result in a harsher sentence. Linda served her 6 months and moved away immediately after her release. I heard she relocated to a different state, working at a job where nobody knew her history. The house she had been so proud of sat empty for months before finally selling at a significant loss. Under Maria's leadership, Maple Ridge Estates became everything Linda had prevented it from being: a real community. We organized block parties where children played safely in the streets. Neighbors helped each other with yard work and home repairs. The community garden that Mrs. Rodriguez had always wanted was built in the common area. Property values increased by 20% as word spread about our transformation. Real estate agents began marketing homes in our neighborhood as family-friendly and community-focused. The HOA budget was transparent and democratic. Every expenditure was voted on by the residents. Monthly meetings became collaborative planning sessions instead of Linda's autocratic pronouncements. Maria established a mediation program for neighbor disputes, replacing Linda's system of fines and threats with communication and compromise. The violation notices that had terrorized residents for years were replaced with friendly reminders and offers of help. Most importantly, children could be children again. Sidewalk chalk art flourished. Bicycles could be left on lawns overnight. Laughter returned to our streets. 3 years have passed since Linda Morrison called 911 on my wife. The neighborhood is unrecognizable, in the best possible way. Maria was re-elected as HOA president unanimously twice. She's also been promoted to lieutenant at the police department, partly due to the leadership skills she demonstrated during our neighborhood crisis. The story of our confrontation with Linda became a case study in HOA reform. Maria has been invited to speak at community management conferences across the country. Several states have passed laws restricting HOA powers and protecting residents from abuse, inspired partly by our story. Linda Morrison's name has become synonymous with HOA overreach. Legal websites reference the Morrison Standard when discussing HOA abuse cases. But the real victory isn't Linda's downfall, it's what we built afterward. Children who were afraid to play outside now organize neighborhood games. Elderly residents who felt isolated now have a support network. Young families who were considering moving away have instead become community leaders. The fear that Linda had used to control everyone has been replaced with cooperation and mutual respect. Mrs. Patterson's roses now grow as tall as she wants them. Mr. Chen's grass is whatever length makes him happy. The Hartman's daughter creates masterpieces in sidewalk chalk that the whole neighborhood admires. Garden gnomes have returned to Mrs. Rodriguez's front yard, and they're joined by gnomes from neighbors who bought them in solidarity. Epilogue: the badge of honor. People sometimes ask Maria if she regrets moving to Maple Ridge Estates. They wonder if the conflict with Linda was worth the stress and legal battles. Maria always gives the same answer: Linda Morrison was a bully who hurt good people. Someone had to stop her. The badge that Linda tried to use against Maria, claiming it was fake, demanding she hide it, calling 911 to report it, became the symbol of everything Linda couldn't understand about service and sacrifice. When those 6 officers saluted Maria in our front yard, they weren't just saluting her badge. They were saluting the idea that good people should be protected from bullies, that service deserves respect, and that sometimes the best way to honor the badge is to use it to defend others. Linda Morrison learned too late that some people can't be intimidated, some fights aren't worth picking, and some badges represent something more powerful than neighborhood politics. The well-maintained lawns of Maple Ridge Estates now represent community pride, not fearful compliance. The clean streets reflect neighbors caring for each other, not residents terrified of fines. And every morning, when Maria pins her badge to her uniform before heading to work, she carries with her the knowledge that she didn't just serve and protect the city, she served and protected our home. That's the real lesson of our story. Bullies count on good people staying quiet. They depend on fear and isolation to maintain their power. But when good people stand together, when they refuse to be intimidated, when they're willing to fight for what's right, even the most entrenched tyrants can be defeated. Linda Morrison called the cops on a cop and learned that badges aren't just about authority, they're about honor, service, and the courage to protect others from people exactly like her. The salute she witnessed in our front yard wasn't just a sign of respect between officers. It was justice recognizing itself, service honoring service, and good people standing together against those who would abuse their power. Sometimes the badge wins. Sometimes justice prevails. Sometimes the bullies face consequences. This was one of those times.